All right, it's the self-help photographer, and I'm back. We're talking about aperture again today. You remember we talked about aperture as the first line of defense in blurry photos. Now we're going to talk about the other thing that aperture controls in your pictures, the fun thing. And that's something called depth of field. Now, depth of field is the difference between the nearest and farthest objects in a picture that appear in focus. For example, do you see how right now I'm in focus and the tripod behind me is out of focus? That's depth of field. Now in this example, you should see that I and the tripod are all relatively in focus. What I've done here is I've created deep depth of field. When you have something that's in front or in back blurry, and you have something else in focus, what you've created is a shallow field of depth, meaning that there's a narrow band of area that is actually in focus in the image, the rest is out. In this example, I have a wide band that is in focus because both I and this tripod, which is behind me, are in focus. So now you're probably wondering, well, how do I do this myself? Well, let me explain. Have you ever gone to the eye doctor to get your eyes checked? They give you those glaucoma drops that dilate your pupils wide open. And do you remember what it's like sitting in the waiting room? You can't see anything. It's all blurry because your pupils are wide open. You've got a huge aperture, meaning you've got a narrow band of depth in your brain picture. When you read the magazine, you got to hold it right in front of your face so that you can actually read the words. Now, on the other hand, what do you do when you're looking at something far away and you want to see it better? Yeah, you squint. By squinting, you're trying to make a smaller aperture in your eye hole in order to get a better depth of field in your brain picture. This is exactly how it works on your camera. Aperture controls the depth of field by virtue of the size of the opening. The wider the aperture, the narrower that band of depth in your image. And the smaller the aperture hole, the greater that band of depth within your image. Now, hold on a second before you get all excited because there is a catch. Have you noticed there's always a catch? Here it is. The aperture is only one factor that controls the depth of field in your image. You also have to consider the spatial relationships between the camera, the subject, and the background. All of those things take part in your depth of field. Okay, here's an example of how it works. You see how right now I and the tripod are both pretty sharp and in focus? I've got a fairly wide opening on my aperture right now. It's set to f5.6. But because I am so close to this tripod, I am within the band of depth for that aperture. But now, watch what happens as I move backwards. At some point, I move outside of the depth of field. And now I become blurry. Because I've exited that depth area, I am not in focus. When I move back into that band, I regain focus. And in this example, I've got a small aperture. I've set to f16. Now watch what happens as I move backwards. You're going to see that even though I'm moving away from the subject, I am still in focus. That's because I'm still within the band of depth of field. That spatial relationship is a big deal, so you have to be aware of that. Now the other thing, as I mentioned, you have to consider is the camera's relationship to the subject. And here's how it goes. The closer the camera is to the subject, the greater you can control the depth of field. The reason for that is how the lens actually focuses. See, when you're focusing very close on something, you move the depth of field area closer to the camera, which means that something that's farther away from it has a greater likelihood of falling out of that band of depth. But if the subject is far away from the camera, what the camera has to do is called focusing at infinity. And what that means is the camera is focusing at infinity, at forever, which means that the band of depth has been moved to forever, way far away from the camera. And because of that, everything that you're taking a picture of is going to be in focus, whether you're using a wide aperture or a small one. All right, that's all I got for you guys today. Now I want you to go out, practice this. Learn how to control the depth of field on your camera, right? Hit me up on Facebook or Twitter if you have any questions. Make sure you like this video. Get out there and take some damn pictures. I'll see you guys next time.